Hey guys! Tonight we begin with the remarkable lives and incredible resilience of medieval peasants. The everyday heroes who, despite the odds, managed to survive some of the coldest and most brutal nights in history. From makeshift insulation tricks to communal sleeping strategies, their story is one of grit, ingenuity, and determination. But let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a single night without your central heating and down comforter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1325. It is the dead of winter, a season that in the medieval world isn't just a time for sledding and hot cocoa, but a rigorous test of endurance that arrives every year like a cruel teacher who doesn't believe in second chances. Picture yourself lying there. You are in a tiny hut constructed of mud and sticks, and the first thing you notice, before the smell, before the itchiness, is the silence of the cold. The temperature inside your home is polite enough to be just a couple of degrees warmer than the freezing void outside. If it's shivering weather out there, it is merely shuddering weather in here. You are living in a structure with walls so thin you could probably hear a bird sneeze from 3 fields away. If you think your modern apartment is drafty because the patio door doesn't quite seal, the medieval peasant home would like to have a word with you. These homes aren't just drafty, they are essentially very enthusiastic wind tunnels that happen to have a roof. Most of these peasant houses are built using a technique historians call wattle and daub. Now, that sounds quaint, almost like a cozy cottage core aesthetic, but the reality is a bit more rustic. It translates to woven sticks, the wattle, crisscrossed like a giant, messy basket, which is then smeared with a charming mixture known as daub. And what is daub, you ask? It is a blend of mud, straw, and yes, animal dung. Before you recoil, understand that they weren't trying to be gross on purpose. Dung was actually a cheap, sticky, and surprisingly effective binder and insulator. Plus, in a village full of livestock, it was always, shall we say, readily available. However, these walls, no matter how lovingly smeared with yesterday's manure, don't stand much of a chance against a proper winter storm. The cold wind finds every crack, every gap where the mud has dried and crumbled away, and it gleefully dances its way into your one-room home. It swirls around the space, making sure you never get too comfortable, nipping at your nose and ears. Privacy is absolutely not an option here, and warmth is a constant negotiation with the elements. Windows are another luxury you likely don't have. If they exist at all, they are laughably tiny apertures, mere slits in the wall. Glass is so expensive that even the lord of the manor up on the hill probably only has a single tiny pane of it to show off to his rich friends. For you, the window is usually just a hole stuffed with a bundle of straw or covered with a thin, stretched animal hide. You are just happy if the winter gale doesn't rip the cowhide right off the wall in the middle of a blizzard, leaving you exposed to the gray sky. And then there is the roof. From a distance, a thatched roof looks picturesque, the kind of thing you'd see on a postcard. But after a few months of heavy rain and snow, that thatch begins to sag. It leaks. It becomes a heavy, sodden sponge sitting on top of your house. Occasionally, it even lets in the local wildlife, because nothing says good morning like a squirrel dropping onto your shoulder while you're trying to wake up. Below your feet, the situation isn't much better. Floors are often just compacted dirt. When it rains or snows heavily outside, the moisture seeps up through the ground. So, technically, you could say you have an indoor water feature, though it's less Zen garden and more mud pit. In the depth of winter, every step inside your own home can feel like trudging across a frozen marsh. You are fighting a three-dimensional assault on your body heat. Cold from above, through the leaky thatch, cold from the side through the dung walls, and cold from below rising out of the earth. But medieval peasants weren't the type to just sit there and whine about the thermostat. They got creative. They packed gaps in the walls with moss harvested from the forest floor. They jammed old rags into the worst drafts. Creativity and stubbornness were often the only things standing between them and becoming medieval popsicles. Some historians still debate the efficiency of these vernacular architectures, arguing that perhaps a well-maintained wattle and daub house, fresh with a thick layer of lime wash, might have been cozier than we give it credit for. But looking at the archaeological record of arthritis in peasant skeletons, it's safe to assume it was still a damp, chilly existence. A bit of sheep grease rubbed into the walls or a tapestry of woven reeds might help, but you are essentially living in a basket. As you sit there, the smell of the house hits you, a fragrant symphony of stale beer, human sweat, and wet goat. Scented candles haven't been invented to mask this, and even if they were, they'd just melt into the dirt floor. You try to stretch, but your joints ache from the dampness. You're 22 years old, but your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken. Getting out of bed is a gamble because the floor is either wet from the roof or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. There are no thermostat wars here, no arguing over who left the door open, because the door is just a plank of wood that doesn't fit the frame properly anyway. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it is dangerous. Frostbite and hypothermia are constant risks, especially for the very young or the very old. Every morning that you wake up still breathing is considered a minor miracle, honestly worth celebrating, with a slightly less frozen turnip for breakfast. Surviving a medieval winter isn't about comfort. It is about gritting your teeth and piling on every resource you have. And if your house is falling apart and your best protection against the elements involves mud and goat hair, well, at least you have a roof over your head. Sort of. Now that you've come to terms with the fact that your house is essentially a leaky basket made of mud, you instinctively turn toward the only thing in the room that promises salvation: the hearth. In a modern home, the fireplace is often an aesthetic focal point, a place to display family photos or hang a TV. Here, in your medieval freezing box, the hearth is not a luxury. It is the difference between waking up in the morning and waking up as a rigid, blue-tinted statue. But don't go looking for a charming brick chimney or a mantelpiece where you can hang your stockings. Chimneys are high-tech architecture reserved for stone castles and wealthy abbeys. You, my friend, have a hole in the dirt floor. This is the central hearth, the beating heart of the peasant home. It is usually located smack in the middle of the room to maximize heat distribution, which sounds clever until you realize there is no dedicated exit strategy for the smoke. The smoke is supposed to drift lazily upward and exit through a small hole in the roof, or simply seep out through the thatch. In theory, this works beautifully. In practice, especially on a windy night like this, the smoke has absolutely no interest in leaving. The drafts we talked about earlier, those gusts blowing through your wattle walls, create a chaotic vortex inside the room, pushing the smoke back down into your face. So, you spend your evenings existing in a perpetual gray haze, creating a cozy atmosphere that feels less like a home and more like the inside of a smoked salmon factory. You quickly learn the physics of medieval air quality. The smoke tends to hang in a thick, suspended cloud near the ceiling, creating a distinct boundary layer. If you stand up straight, your head enters the smog zone, and your eyes immediately start streaming tears of pure, stinging agony. If you sit on a low stool or crouch near the floor, the air is relatively breathable. This is why you'll notice that everyone in your family has developed excellent posture for crouching, but terrible posture for standing. You are all essentially crab walking around the house to avoid asphyxiation. The fuel for this temperamental beast is another constant struggle. In a perfect world, you'd be burning seasoned oak logs that crackle pleasantly and smell like a cologne commercial. But you don't own the forest, the Lord does. Chopping down a tree without permission is a fantastic way to get yourself fined or put in the stocks. So, you burn what you can scrounge. This often means faggots, bundles of small sticks and brushwood, or, depending on where you live, dried peat or turf. If you are really unlucky or just thrifty, you might be burning dried animal dung. While dung actually burns surprisingly hot and slow, it gives the room an earthy, pungent aroma that really sticks to your clothes. You don't just feel the warmth, you smell it, and unfortunately, you wear it. This open fire is a high-maintenance toddler that requires constant supervision. It provides light, which is crucial because candles made of beeswax are too expensive for you. You're likely using rush lights, which are just reeds dipped in animal fat that burn for about 20 minutes and smell like frying bacon gone wrong. So, the hearth is your light bulb, your stove, and your heater all rolled into one. You cook your pottage in a cauldron suspended over the flames by a chain or an iron tripod. The tricky part is navigating the fire without setting yourself ablaze. Remember, in this era, clothes are billowing, flammable fabrics, and fire safety regulations are non-existent. One wrong step while stirring the soup, and your tunic could catch a spark. It's a delicate dance of cooking dinner while trying not to become dinner. There is a fascinating, if slightly morbid, biological consequence to this lifestyle. Archaeologists examining the skeletons of medieval peasants often find evidence of chronic sinus infections and rib damage from persistent coughing. Your lungs are effectively being tanned like leather from the inside out. However, there is a fringe benefit that some historians argue might have been intentional, or at least a happy accident. The constant smoke fumigating the upper reaches of your roof likely discouraged rats, insects, and birds from nesting in the thatch. So, while you are coughing up soot, you can take comfort in the fact that the roof isn't currently being eaten by beetles. It's a trade-off: respiratory health for structural integrity. Historians still argue whether the lack of chimneys in peasant housing was purely an economic constraint or a matter of thermal efficiency. Some suggest that an open fire in the center of the room actually radiates heat more effectively than a fireplace set against a wall, which loses half its heat to the masonry. By keeping the fire in the middle and allowing the smoke to linger, you create a thermal mass of warm air, albeit toxic air, that keeps the temperature bearable. It's a crude form of central heating, where the ductwork is just the room you are standing in. But the fire brings a psychological comfort that goes beyond just temperature. In the pitch-black darkness of a medieval winter night, where the world outside is hostile and filled with superstitious terrors, the glowing embers are a tether to civilization. You stare into the flames, watching the orange light flicker against the soot-stained walls. It's hypnotic. It's the original television. You and your family gather around it, not just for warmth, but because it is the only source of light in a world that shuts down at sunset. You share stories, you mend tools, you pick lice off each other, all within the golden, smoky radius of the hearth. However, you can never truly relax. The fire is dangerous. Your house is made of wood, straw, and dried mud, essentially a pile of kindling arranged in the shape of a home. A rogue spark popping out of the fire pit could ignite the straw floor mats or the thatched roof in seconds. In towns, this fear is so prevalent that the curfew bell, from the French couvre-feu, meaning cover fire, rings every night, signaling that it is time to dampen the flames and go to sleep. But here in your isolated hut, you are the fire marshal. You have to balance the need for heat with the very real possibility of burning your house down around your ears while you sleep. It is a relationship of dependency and fear. You love the fire because it keeps the frostbite at bay. You hate the fire because it stings your eyes and threatens to destroy everything you own. As the night deepens, the fire burns down to glowing coals. The intense heat fades, replaced by a gentle, dying warmth. The smoke settles slightly, but the smell is baked into your skin, your hair, and your soul. You are now warm enough to survive, but you are also marinated in wood smoke, like a piece of jerky. And as you turn your back to the fire to warm your other side, because inevitably your front is roasting while your back is freezing, you realize that managing this fire is a full-time job that doesn't end when you close your eyes. In fact, the work of keeping it alive without letting it kill you is just beginning. Now that you've managed to stop shivering long enough to appreciate the smoky death trap that is your central heating, you face the most critical task of the evening. It is time for bed, but you cannot simply pour a bucket of water on the fire and call it a night. Matches won't be invented for another 500 years or so. If you let this fire go out completely, relighting it in the freezing damp of tomorrow morning isn't just a hassle, it's a technological crisis. You'd have to strike flint and steel over tinder with numb, clumsy fingers, hoping a spark catches before you freeze. Or worse, you'd have to run to a neighbor's house with a broken piece of pottery to borrow a burning coal, a humiliating walk of shame that screams to the whole village, I am bad at basic survival. So you engage in the nightly ritual known as banking the fire. This is an art form, a delicate high-stakes game of thermal management that every adult peasant must master. The goal is to put the fire to sleep without killing it. You want it to stop burning actively, because flames consume fuel too quickly and might set your bedding on fire while you snooze. But you need the core heat to remain alive, smoldering secretly until dawn. You take a heavy iron tool, or perhaps a sturdy piece of green wood, and scrape the scattered, glowing embers together into a tight little pile in the center of the hearth. It's like tucking them into bed. Then you cover this glowing mound with a thick layer of ash. This seems counterintuitive, like you are suffocating the very thing you want to save. But the ash acts as an insulator. It cuts off the oxygen supply just enough to halt the open flames, slowing the combustion rate down to a crawl, yet it traps the heat inside the core. It is essentially putting your fire into hibernation mode. If you are wealthy, which, let's be real, you are not, you might own a curfew bell or a fire cover. These are domed earthenware or metal lids with holes in them that you place over the embers to keep them safe and prevent sparks from flying. But for you, ash is the technology of choice. You pack it down gently, ensuring no bright orange glimmers are visible. It has to be a perfect seal. Too loose, and the air gets in, the fuel burns away in an hour, and you wake up to a cold pile of gray dust. Too tight, and you choke it completely, extinguishing the spark forever. You are performing CPR on a pile of coals, trying to find that sweet spot of breathability. This moment creates a profound shift in the room's atmosphere. The flickering orange light that danced on the walls vanishes, plunging the hut into absolute, crushing darkness. The only light now comes from the tiny cracks in the walls where moonlight might filter through, or perhaps the faint glow of the snow outside. The temperature immediately begins to drop. The radiant heat that was roasting your shins moments ago fades, replaced by the creeping cold that has been waiting patiently in the corners of the room. This is the witching hour for temperature, the time when the house begins its slow surrender to the frost. But banking the fire serves another purpose, one steeped in the deep superstition of your time. The hearth is the spiritual center of the home. In many folklore traditions, the fire is almost a living entity, a domestic spirit that guards the family. Letting the fire die isn't just careless, it's bad luck. It invites cold spirits, fey folk, or just bad vibes into the home. By keeping the seed of fire alive, you are maintaining the continuity of the household's life force. Some historians still argue whether these rituals were purely practical or if they held a genuine quasi-religious significance for the peasantry, seeing the hearth as a liminal space between the physical and spiritual worlds. Either way, you aren't taking any chances. You treat those embers with more respect than you treat your siblings. Once the fire is banked, the acoustic landscape of your night changes. The comforting crackle and pop of burning wood is gone. In its place, the silence amplifies the other sounds of the house. You hear the wind whistling through the thatch more clearly. You hear the shifting of the animals tethered at the other end of the room. We'll get to them later. You hear the breathing of your family members. The house feels smaller, darker, and infinitely colder without the active flames. You might place a large, flat stone near the ash pile before you retreat. This isn't part of the banking process itself, but a preparation for the morning. The stone absorbs some of the residual heat from the banked hearth. In the morning, this warm stone can be used to warm up water for washing if you're feeling ambitious, or simply to warm your hands when you first crawl out of your covers. It's a primitive thermal battery, storing energy tonight for use tomorrow. There is a specific anxiety that comes with this ritual. As you lie in the dark, you will inevitably wonder, did I cover it enough? Is it still burning? Did a spark escape? It's the medieval equivalent of wondering if you left the oven on, except the consequences are immediate freezing or total incineration. You might lift your head to squint into the darkness, sniffing for the scent of smoke that signals a flare-up or the absence of the faint warmth that signals death. It's a peculiar skill, this fire banking. It requires an intuitive understanding of materials, airflow, and timing. You learned it by watching your parents, who learned it from theirs. It is a generational transfer of survival knowledge, and when it works, when you rake back the ashes in the morning and see that bright, glowing red eye winking back at you, it feels like a small victory. You feed it a bit of dry straw, blow gently, and watch the flames leap back to life. You have successfully transported fire through time, bridging the gap between yesterday and today. But for now, in the pitch black, the fire is asleep. The heat is fading. The protective bubble of warmth is shrinking with every passing minute. You are now solely dependent on the passive heat retention of your home and your body. The active defense is over. The passive endurance begins. The fire is resting, and now you must find a way to stay warm without it. With the fire now banked and sleeping under its blanket of gray ash, the aggressive defense of your home is over. The heat source has been throttled down, and almost immediately, the enemy seizes the advantage. You can feel it before you hear it. The wind outside, no longer content to just batter the roof, begins to probe the perimeter of your house like a thief looking for an unlocked window. And in a wattle and daub hut that has endured years of rain, sun, and settling earth, the thief always finds a way in. You lie there in the deepening dark, and you feel a distinct, icy ribbon of air slice across the room. It hits the back of your neck with the precision of an assassin. The walls of your home, which looked so solid in the daylight, are actually treacherous traitors. The daub, that mixture of mud and straw we talked about earlier, dries out over time. It shrinks, it cracks, and it pulls away from the timber frame. In the summer, these cracks are just extra ventilation, a way to clear out the smoke. But tonight, they are jagged wounds in the hull of your ship, letting the freezing ocean pour in. You cannot simply ignore this. If you leave a draft unplugged, that single stream of cold air will create a convection current that sucks the remaining warmth right out of your bedding. So, you have to engage in some emergency medieval DIY. You don't have a caulking gun or a tube of silicone sealant. You have a bucket of patching sludge that you keep near the door for exactly this purpose, and you have the bounty of the forest floor. Your primary weapon in the war against drafts is moss. Sphagnum moss, specifically, is the miracle material of the Middle Ages. It is soft, pliable, and incredibly absorbent. Earlier in the autumn, you likely sent the children out into the woods with baskets to scrape great green clumps of it off the northern sides of oak trees. You have a pile of it dried and waiting in the corner. When you find a crack, perhaps by wetting your finger and holding it up to feel the breeze, you grab a handful of this dried moss. You jam it into the fissure with your thumb, working it deep into the gap. The beauty of moss is that it is reactive. As the damp night air hits it, the moss absorbs the moisture and expands slightly, swelling to fit the hole perfectly. It is a self-sealing biological cork. You work your way around the wall, feeling for the telltale chill, plugging the gaps with satisfying squishy thuds. It's a tactile, repetitive task, feeling the rough texture of the dried mud wall and the soft, spongy give of the moss. But sometimes, the hole is too big for just moss. Maybe a chunk of daub has fallen off completely, shaken loose by a slamming door or a clumsy goat. For this, you need the heavy artillery. You reach for that bucket we mentioned. Inside is a fresh mixture of clay, water, and the secret ingredient that holds the medieval world together, animal dung. Yes, we are back to the poop, but hear me out. Cow manure, in particular, is full of undigested fibers from the grass the cow ate. When mixed with clay, these fibers act like rebar in concrete, creating a patch that is incredibly strong and resistant to cracking once it dries. You scoop up a handful of this fibrous sludge. It's cold, it's sticky, and yes, it smells exactly like you think it does. But in the hierarchy of suffering, being cold is worse than smelling a bit agricultural. You slap the mixture over the moss-filled crack, smoothing it out with your palm to blend it into the existing wall. You are essentially spackling your house with barnyard waste. The heat from your hand helps it bond slightly, or at least that's what you tell yourself to make the process feel less gross. There is a mainstream historical fact here that often gets overlooked. Home maintenance was a constant, seasonal cycle for peasants. The phrase, spring cleaning, likely originates from the necessity of stripping off the winter's accumulation of soot and redaubing the entire house once the frost thawed. But in the dead of winter, you are just doing triage. You are patching the leaks to keep the ship afloat until morning. Historians still argue about the extent to which peasants used interior wall coverings to assist with this insulation. We know the wealthy had grand tapestries depicting hunts and battles, which served the dual purpose of showing off wealth and keeping drafts at bay. For a peasant like you, a tapestry is out of the question. However, some evidence suggests that better-off peasants might have hung painted cloths, sheets of canvas, or coarse linen painted with cheap religious scenes or decorative patterns. These would hang an inch or two off the wall, creating a dead air space that acted as a secondary insulator. If you are lucky enough to have one, you can watch it ripple and dance in the dark, a visual ghost detector showing you exactly where the wind is coming through the wall. If you don't have painted cloths, you might use old sacks, worn-out blankets, or even bundles of dried reed tied together to create a barrier. You shove these against the base of the door, creating the ancestor of the modern draft snake. The door, after all, is the biggest hole of them all. It's usually just a few planks of wood held together with iron nails, swelling and shrinking with the humidity. The gap at the bottom is often big enough for a rat to crawl through, which means the cold wind treats it like an open highway. You pile straw, rags, and maybe a sleeping dog against the threshold to seal it. There is a frantic energy to this process. You are racing against the cooling room. Every minute you spend out of bed is a minute you are losing body heat. But if you don't plug the holes, you'll lose even more heat later. It is a calculated investment of shivering. You run your hands over the rough, uneven surface of your home, learning its geography by touch. Here is the spot where the rain always gets in. Here is the crack that opened up last year during the drought. Your house is a living record of the weather it has survived. Finally, you feel you have done enough. The sharpest drafts are blunted. The room still feels cold, but the active currents of air have been slowed to a stagnant chill. The smell of the fresh dung patch mingles with the stale smoke, adding a pungent, earthy top note to the house's bouquet. You wipe your hands on a piece of straw. Washing them in water would just make them freeze, and prepare to retreat. You have sealed the perimeter as best as you can. You have turned your home into a fortress of mud and moss. But the walls are still thin, and the night is still long. The cold is now seeping through the materials themselves, bypassing your patches by simply radiating the freeze through the solid matter. You have fixed the house, but now you must look to the only other layer of defense you have left. It is time to turn your attention to the walking laundry pile that is your own body. You have successfully turned your house into a sealed mud box, but as you stand there in the center of the room, you realize the cold is still winning. It is radiating from the floor, drifting down from the thatch, and seemingly passing right through your skin. It becomes clear that relying on the architecture to keep you warm is a fool's game. The house is just a shell. The real insulation must be applied directly to the payload. That payload is you. In the modern world, bedtime usually involves a ritual of shedding. You peel off the day's constraints, the tight jeans, the stiff work shirts, and slip into something light, airy, and breathable. Maybe some silk pajamas if you're fancy, or just an oversized t-shirt. But here, In the depths of a medieval winter, the concept of undressing for bed is tantamount to a suicide attempt. You do not take clothes off. You put more clothes on. You are about to become a human onion, wrapping yourself in layer after layer of organic fiber until you are less a person and more a walking laundry pile. The foundation of your thermal defense is linen. You are currently wearing a chemise or a smock, a long, loose-fitting shirt made from the fibers of the flax plant. This is your underwear, your base layer, and honestly, your second skin. You probably haven't taken it off in weeks. This isn't just because you're lazy. It's because the shock of cold air hitting your bare torso is genuinely painful. This linen layer serves a crucial mechanical function. It captures the warm air radiating immediately off your skin and traps it against your body. It also absorbs your sweat, which is vital because if that sweat were to soak into your outer wool layers and freeze, you would be in serious trouble. Over this grimy linen foundation, you wear your wool. Wool is the miracle fabric of the Middle Ages. It is the Gore-Tex of the 14th century. The sheep from which this wool was shorn have spent millions of years evolving to survive on windswept, rainy hillsides, and by wearing their hair, you are stealing their evolutionary superpowers. You are likely wearing a tunic, perhaps two. The bottom one is older, thinner, maybe full of holes. The top one is your good tunic, thick and heavy. But here is the sensory reality that romantic period dramas usually skip over. Medieval wool is not cashmere. It is not a soft merino blend that feels like a hug. It is coarse, it is stiff, and it is relentlessly scratchy. It feels like you are being hugged by a scouring pad. As you pile these layers on, you invoke the itch-scratch cycle. You feel an itch on your lower back, but you are wearing a linen shirt, a tunic, and a surcoat. You physically cannot reach the itch. It is buried under 3 inches of compressed fabric. You just have to wiggle against the wall like a bear scratching itself on a tree and hope for the best. To prepare for sleep, you don't loosen your belt, you tighten everything. You check the garters, holding up your hose, separate woolen leggings that cover your legs. You pull them up as high as they will go and tie them securely to your waist cord. A loose hose means a gap at the knee, and a gap at the knee is an invitation for the frost to bite your kneecaps. You might even stuff a handful of dry straw into your leather shoes or wrap your feet in rags before settling down because the extremities are the first to go numb. Now, let's address the head. You might have heard the mainstream historical fact that you lose a massive percentage of your body heat through your head. While modern science has debunked the exact percentage, it's not actually 80%, more like 10%, to a medieval peasant. That 10% is the difference between life and death. So you never, ever sleep bareheaded. You wear a coif. This is a tight-fitting white linen cap that ties under the chin. It makes you look like a giant baby or a very serious baker, but you don't care about fashion. You care about your ears not turning black and falling off. Over the coif, you might pull up the hood attached to your outer tunic. This double layering of the skull is essential. There is a fascinating scholarly debate that pops up regarding medieval sleeping habits. If you look at illuminated manuscripts from the era, you will often see illustrations of people sleeping completely naked, sometimes wearing only a nightcap. Art historians and social historians have argued about this for decades. Does this mean everyone slept naked? Was it a religious convention to show humility? Or perhaps these illustrations depict summer nights? The consensus among those who study historical climate survival is that while sleeping naked might have been the norm for the wealthy in warm castles with roaring fireplaces and fur blankets, for a peasant in a drafty hut in February, stripping down would be insanity. The naked sleeper trope is likely just that, a trope or a summertime luxury. You, in your freezing reality, are definitely keeping your pants on. There is also a quirky, slightly claustrophobic element to this layering. As you add the final layer, perhaps a heavy, rough-spun cloak that you wrap around your shoulders like a shawl, your range of motion drops to near zero. You feel heavy. Your arms sit awkwardly at your sides, pushed out by the bulk of the fabric under your armpits. Turning your head requires a full body rotation because your neck is braced in wool. You are stiff, padded, and encased. And then there is the smell. As your body heat begins to warm up the layers of damp wool, a distinct aroma is released. Wet wool smells like wet dog mixed with old lanolin. It is a musky, animalistic scent that permeates the room. But to you, that smell is actually comforting. It smells like heat. It smells like survival. You also have to strategize your bathroom needs. Once you are fully encased in your linen wool hose cocoon, the idea of needing to pee in the middle of the night is a logistical nightmare. It involves untying complex knots with frozen fingers in the dark, lifting layers of heavy fabric, and exposing sensitive areas to sub-zero drafts. As a result, many peasants practiced a form of voluntary dehydration before bed, stopping their intake of ale or water hours before sleep to avoid the dreaded midnight struggle. So there you stand, a shapeless, bulky silhouette in the dark. You are itchy, you smell like a wet sheep, and you can barely bend your elbows. But as you feel the rough wool pressing against your skin, trapping your body heat in a stagnant layer of air, you feel a faint glimmer of security. The air in the room may be freezing, but inside your fortress of fabric, it is a tropical 60 degrees Fahrenheit. You are a self-contained heating unit, insulated by the labor of the loom and the distaff. You are ready to face the next challenge, the bed itself. But getting into bed when you are dressed like the Michelin Man is a challenge all on its own. Now, as you stand there, fully encased in your itchy wool cocoon, a thought might drift through your mind. It's a very modern thought, a phantom instinct from a future you haven't lived yet. You feel the grime on your skin, the sticky residue of wood smoke and sweat, and you think, I would kill for a hot shower. You imagine the steam, the soap, the scrubbing, but you must banish this thought immediately. In the deep winter of 1325, washing your entire body isn't just a logistical nightmare involving hauling frozen buckets of water from a well. It is viewed as a reckless act of self-sabotage. To strip down and scrub away your accumulated filth would be like a soldier walking into battle and voluntarily taking off his armor because it felt a bit heavy. You see, in your world, grime is not a sign of failure. It is a protective coating. It is a biological sealant. Over the last few months of winter, your skin has been working overtime to produce sebum, natural oils that coat your epidermis. Mixed with the inevitable soot from the chimneyless hearth, the dust from the straw floor, and the general particulate matter of living in a barn, this creates a distinct, heavy layer on your body. To a modern dermatologist, this is a clogged pore disaster waiting to happen. To you, it is nature's waterproofing. There is a prevailing medical theory in your time that justifies your lack of bathing. Physicians, those terrifying men who think leeches are the answer to everything, believe that bathing in hot water opens the pores of the skin. In their minds, the skin is like a fortress gate. When you heat it and scrub it, you are throwing those gates wide open, and what is waiting outside? Miasmas, or bad air, and the biting cold. If you open your pores, the freezing vapors will invade your body, chill your humors, and you will almost certainly catch a fever and die. Therefore, keeping your pores firmly clogged with dirt is actually a health and safety protocol. You are sealing the fortress against the invisible enemies of the night. This doesn't mean you are completely feral. There is a mainstream historical fact that often gets lost in the dirty medieval peasant stereotype. People did wash. You wash your hands and face every morning, usually with a little water poured from a hanging ceramic jug or a basin. It's polite, it wakes you up, and it keeps the crud out of your eyes. But a full body immersion, a tub, that is for summer or for the very rich who can afford enough firewood to heat a giant vat of water without freezing the rest of the house. For you, right now, clean is a relative term. Clean means I can see the color of my knuckles, not I smell like lavender. Instead of water, you rely on a method that feels suspiciously like dry cleaning. You use a rough linen cloth to vigorously rub your skin. The friction removes the worst of the dead skin and surface muck without stripping away those precious, insulating oils. It's less of a bath and more of a buffing. You are polishing yourself like an old boot. This brings us to the unsung hero of medieval hygiene, your linen shirt. Remember that bottom layer we talked about, the one you haven't taken off? Medieval people believed that the linen itself cleaned the body. The theory was that the linen absorbed the sweat and impurities from your skin, pulling them away like a wick. So, instead of washing your body, you wash the shirt. Or, more accurately, you change the shirt once every few weeks if you own a spare. If the shirt is stiff with sweat, that means it's working. It has successfully trapped the toxins. You are essentially using your underwear as a removable hygiene filter. But let's talk about the smell. You might worry that living in a small, unventilated hut with 5 other unwashed people and a cow would be unbearable. But here is the quirky, physiological mercy of the human body, olfactory fatigue. You and everyone you know have gone nose blind. The scent of unwashed human, a musky, yeasty, cheesy aroma, is simply the background radiation of your life. You don't smell it any more than you smell the nitrogen in the air. In fact, if someone were to walk in smelling of floral soap and mint, that would be the offensive odor. It would smell artificial, sharp, and suspicious. The warm, heavy scent of the room is the scent of life. It's the smell of a pack of animals surviving together. However, historians still argue about the extent of this acceptance of smell. Some records suggest that medieval people were actually quite sensitive to bad odors, associating them with sin and disease. There are recipes for breath fresheners made of anise and fennel, and instructions for placing fragrant herbs like meadowsweet and rosemary among bed linens to mask the funk. So, while you might be nose blind to your own family's eau de pesant, you might still scatter some dried sage on the floor just to take the edge off when the wind blows the wrong way. There is also the practical danger of getting wet. If you were to wash, you would be wet. In a house where the temperature is hovering near freezing, wet skin is a heat sink. Evaporation is a cooling process, great for a hot summer day, fatal for a winter night. If you get your hair wet, it will freeze into icicles before it dries. If your tunic gets damp, it loses its insulating properties. Staying dry is infinitely more important than being clean. Dirt is dry. Dirt is safe. So, you embrace the itch. You embrace the feeling of your skin being slightly tacky to the touch. It feels like you are wearing a very thin, invisible wetsuit. You might feel a flea crawling across your shoulder blade, a constant companion we will discuss later, but the layer of grime might actually slow him down a bit. It's a terrain obstacle for parasites. In a strange way, this layer makes you feel tougher. You look at your hands, stained with the charcoal of the fire and the earth of the floor, and you see tools that are hardened against the elements. You aren't soft, pink, and vulnerable like a newborn piglet. You are weathered. You are cured like a ham hanging in the smoke. As you prepare to lie down, you don't worry about staining the sheets, because the sheets are already the color of oatmeal and despair. You don't worry about getting the pillow dirty, because the pillow is a log or a sack of straw. The concept of mess doesn't apply when the entire environment is composed of organic matter. You are just one more organic lump in a house made of mud. You rub your hands together, feeling the dry friction of calluses and soot. It creates a tiny bit of warmth. You pull your cuffs down over your knuckles. You are sealed, coated, and wrapped. The wind can whistle through the cracks in the wall. It can rattle the door, but it cannot touch your skin. You have built a barrier of fabric and filth that the frost cannot easily penetrate. You are a masterpiece of medieval insulation, a triumph of function over form. And frankly, being a little bit stinky is a small price to pay to keep your blood liquid until morning. You are now a bundled, grime-coated fortress against the elements, but insulation alone is not enough. Insulation only retains heat. It does not generate it. Your body is a biological engine, and like any engine running in sub-zero temperatures, it requires fuel, heavy, dense, slow-burning fuel. If you were a modern person, you might reach for a light salad or a smoothie before bed. In 1325, that would be a death sentence. You need a meal that sits in your stomach like a warm anchor, a meal that demands so much energy to digest that the very act of breaking it down keeps your blood simmering. You need pottage. You move toward the hearth, where the iron cauldron has been bubbling sluggishly all day. This cauldron is the true matriarch of the household. It is never fully emptied, never fully scrubbed. It contains the perpetual stew, the new ingredients, chopped turnips, dried peas, onions, maybe a scrap of salted pork fat, are simply thrown in on top of the remnants of yesterday's meal and the day before that. You are effectively eating a soup that has a lineage. It has a history. The bottom layer might be from last Tuesday. You take your wooden bowl, or perhaps a trencher, a hollowed out piece of stale bread that acts as an edible plate, and ladle out a portion. It does not splash, it plops. This is not soup in the Campbell's sense. It is a gelatinous beige mortar. It is thick enough to stand a spoon in upright. In fact, if the spoon falls over, the cook is considered to have failed. As the steam rises from the bowl, hitting your cold face, you close your eyes and inhale. It smells of boiled cabbage, earth, and savory smoke. It is the perfume of survival. You sit on a three-legged stool, knees pulled up to your chest to conserve warmth, and take the first bite. The heat is shocking. It travels down your throat like a molten lead weight, radiating warmth outward through your chest. You can almost feel the temperature of your core rising by a degree. But the real magic happens later. This meal is engineered for thermogenesis, the production of heat within the body. The star of this culinary show is the turnip. Along with parsnips and perhaps some withered carrots stored in sand, the turnip is the winter king. It is dense, fibrous, and refuses to rot. But let's be honest, it is also incredibly boring. It tastes like damp earth that has given up on life. However, when combined with dried field peas or beans, it creates a nutritional brick that sits in your gut for hours. Your digestive system has to go into overdrive to break down this heavy, fibrous mass. Your stomach churns, your intestines contract, and this metabolic labor generates internal body heat. You are essentially turning your belly into a combustion engine. There is a popular mainstream historical fact that peasants rarely ate meat. While true that you aren't feasting on roast venison like the lord in the castle, you are likely getting more protein than popular culture gives you credit for. It comes in the form of white meats, cheese, eggs, and milk, or legumes. But the holy grail is bacon. Not the crispy strips you know, but chunks of cured, fatty salt pork. If you are lucky enough to have a piece of this floating in your bowl, you save it for last. You chew the fat slowly. Fat is high energy fuel. It burns long and hot in the metabolic furnace. Historians still debate the nutritional quality of this peasant diet. For a long time, it was assumed to be one of starvation and deficiency. But modern analysis suggests that pottage, rich in vegetables, grains, and legumes, was actually incredibly healthy, low in sugar, high in fiber, and packed with vitamins. It was likely healthier than the diet of the nobility, which was heavy on meats and sweets and low on fiber. So, while the Lord is suffering from gout up on the hill, you are enjoying excellent digestive regularity, assuming you survive the famine. As you eat, you engage in the peasant chew. You don't rush. You grind the coarse barley bread that accompanies the stew. This bread is dark, heavy, and sometimes contains grit from the millstones, which is why your teeth are worn flat. But the act of chewing itself warms the muscles of the jaw and face. It is a slow, rhythmic process. The room is filled with the sounds of slurping and chewing. Manners are a luxury for warmer climates. Here, eating is a serious business. There is also a psychological comfort to this heaviness. When you finish the bowl, wiping it clean with a crust of bread so as not to waste a single calorie, you feel a profound sense of fullness. It is a sensation bordering on sedation. The itis, the food coma, whatever you call it is your friend. It makes your eyelids heavy. It dulls the sharpness of the cold air nipping at your nose. It prepares you for the long stillness of the night. Sometimes, if the harvest was good, there might be ale, not the fizzy, cold beer of today, but a thick, sweet, room temperature small beer with low alcohol content. You drink it from a leather tankard or a horn. It adds another layer of calories. Liquid bread, basically. The alcohol provides a false sense of warmth, a beer jacket, flushing blood to the skin. While medically this actually loses heat, psychologically it makes the freezing draft from the door feel a little less personal. You might glance at your family members as you eat. In the flickering light of the dying fire, before you banked it, their faces are smeared with the same grease, their eyes heavy with the same fatigue. There is a communal solidarity in the pottage. You are all fueled by the same pot, energized by the same turnips. You are a single organism, a hive, refueling for the night shift of sleep. Occasionally, you might find something unexpected in the stew, a bay leaf, a sprig of thyme, or perhaps a beetle that fell in. You pick out the beetle or eat it, extra protein, but the herbs are a reminder that even in the bleakness of winter, there is flavor. The peasant palate wasn't dead. It was just limited by what could be dried or salted. A hit of mustard seed or garlic in the pottage is a sudden explosion of sensation that wakes up your mouth before the heavy grains put it back to sleep. But mostly, the meal is about weight. You want to feel weighed down. A light stomach is a restless stomach, and a restless sleeper wakes up and notices how cold their toes are. You want to be anchored to the mattress by the sheer density of your dinner. You want your digestion to be a loud, industrious factory that hums all night long, radiating heat from your center out to your extremities. As you place your empty bowl on the floor, washing it can wait until spring, or at least until tomorrow, you feel the turnip radiator kicking in. Your belly feels tight and warm. The blood is rushing to your stomach to aid the effort. You let out a satisfied, unself-conscious belch, a compliment to the cook and a release of pressure. You are filled with earth and grain. You are practically made of soil yourself at this point. You are now insulated on the outside by wool and grime, and heated on the inside by fermentation and metabolic labor. You are a walking, breathing thermos. But the preparation isn't quite finished. You have addressed the walls, your body, and your stomach. Now you must address the most dangerous part of the night, the moment you have to lie down on a bed that has been soaking up the cold all day long. It's time to preheat the sheets. You are now full of pottage and wrapped in layers of wool, but a formidable enemy remains, the bed itself. In a room that has been freezing all day, your mattress is not a cozy nest. It is a thermal sinkhole. It is a block of cold straw and damp fabric waiting to suck the precious heat right out of your body the moment you lie down. To climb into it, cold, is to shock your system and spend the first hour of sleep shivering violently. So you must preheat the landing zone. This is where the ancient technology of the hot stone comes into play. Earlier in the evening, while the fire was still roaring, you likely placed several smooth, river-rounded stones near the flames. You didn't put them directly in the fire. That would make them too hot to handle and potentially crack them, sending stone shrapnel flying into your soup. Instead, you let them roast gently on the hearthstones, soaking up thermal energy like little geological batteries. Now, you retrieve these stones. You handle them with extreme caution, perhaps using a pair of iron tongs or wrapping your hands in thick rags. These are your medieval hot water bottles, but without the water and without the rubber. They are dry heat. You wrap each stone in a piece of old wool or linen. This wrapping is crucial. If a naked, scorching rock touches your straw mattress, you will wake up to a bonfire. If it touches your bare leg, assuming you have a gap in your hose, you will wake up with a third-degree burn. The cloth moderates the heat release, ensuring a slow, steady warmth rather than a sudden sear. You slide these bundled stones into the foot of your bed, deep down where your toes will eventually rest. You might also place one in the center, right where your kidneys will be. You leave them there for a few minutes, patting the mattress down to distribute the heat. It's a primitive form of an electric blanket, powered by geology and foresight. When you finally slide your legs into the bed, instead of encountering a frozen void, your feet meet a delightful, radiating warmth. It is one of the few true luxuries of your existence, a moment of pure, unadulterated comfort in a harsh world. But stones aren't the only trick up your sleeve. If you are a particularly crafty peasant, you might utilize a hay box or a fireless cooker concept, although in this context, it's for bedding. A hay box is essentially a wooden crate or a hole in the ground lined tightly with hay or straw. It's an insulator par excellence. While typically used to keep pots of food hot without using fuel, the principle applies to your sleeping arrangements. You might keep your heavy woolen blanket stored in a similar insulated chest during the day, perhaps even with a warm stone inside it, so that when you pull it out at night, it isn't stiff with cold. It's preconditioned. There is also the warming pan, though this is often a tool for the slightly wealthier classes. If your village has a local blacksmith who is feeling creative, you might have seen one, a metal pan with a long wooden handle and a perforated lid. You fill the pan with live coals from the fire, close the lid, and slide it between your sheets, moving it back and forth rapidly so as not to scorch the fabric. It irons the sheets and warms the bed simultaneously. But for you, the humble peasant, a metal pan is an expensive luxury. You stick to the rocks. Rocks are free. Rocks are reliable. However, there is a quirky downside to the hot stone method. As the night wears on, the stone cools down. Eventually, it becomes just a cold, hard rock in your bed. Sometime around 3 o'clock a.m., you will inevitably kick it with your ankle bone. The pain is sharp and startling, a rude reminder that comfort is fleeting. You will then have to groggily fish the cold rock out of the bed and toss it onto the floor, where it will land with a thud that wakes up the dog. Historians still argue about the prevalence of heated bricks versus stones. In regions with clay soil, peasants might have used fired clay bricks, which hold heat differently than stone, sometimes longer, sometimes less intensely. In coastal areas, dense beach cobbles were prized. It's a localized technology, dependent on the geology of your backyard. Your bed is literally grounded in the landscape you inhabit. There is another source of preheating that is far less technological and far more biological, the pre-sleeper. In large, multi-generational households, it wasn't uncommon for children or the elderly, who spent more time indoors, to be sent to bed early. Their job, whether they knew it or not, was to act as human bed warmers for the working adults who would join them later. By the time you, the exhausted plowman, climb in, the bed has been brought up to temperature by the body heat of your grandma and your 3 nephews. It's efficient, communal, and completely free of charge. But let's go back to the stones for a moment. There is a specific smell associated with this ritual, the scent of scorching wool. As the hot rock heats the rag wrapped around it, and as that rag heats the straw mattress, a faint, dry, toasted aroma rises from the bed. It smells like a hot iron on a linen shirt. To you, this is the smell of safety. It means the cold has been temporarily banished. It means you have successfully transferred a piece of the hearth into your sleeping quarters. You might also use this opportunity to dry out your damp socks or hose. You wrap them around the warm stones before putting them in the bed. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone, pun intended. It warms the bed and it dries your clothes for the next morning. Waking up to warm, dry socks is a psychological victory that cannot be overstated. Waking up to cold, wet socks is a recipe for despair. There is a danger, of course. If the stone is too hot or the wrapping too thin, the straw can smolder. Bed warmers were a leading cause of house fires in the medieval period. You have to be vigilant. You might check the temperature with your hand several times before committing it to the straw. It's a nightly game of Russian roulette with thermodynamics. But the risk is worth it. The alternative is lying awake for hours, your teeth chattering, your muscles tensed against the chill, waiting for your own slow metabolism to do the work that a rock can do in minutes. As you slide into the bed, pushing your feet against the bundled stones, you let out a long breath. The steam from your breath is still visible in the dark room, but under the covers, a microclimate is forming. The heat from the stones meets the heat from your pottage-filled belly. The layers of wool trap it all. You have created a pocket of survival. The stones are hard, lumpy, and cumbersome, but right now, they feel better than softest down. They are the anchors of heat in a sea of cold. You have successfully warmed the target area with your hot stones, but now you must confront the reality of the landing zone itself. You are not climbing onto a memory foam mattress with pocketed coils and cooling gel technology. You are climbing onto a sack of dead grass. This is the pallet, the universal bed of the peasantry, and it is less a piece of furniture and more of a chaotic agricultural project that you happen to sleep on. The construction is simple. You take a large sack made of coarse canvas or hemp, and you stuff it with straw. Note the distinction: straw, not hay. Hay is for horses. It contains seeds and nutrients and tends to rot if it gets damp. Straw is the dry, hollow stalk left over after the grain has been harvested. It is cleaner, but it is also stiffer. It has structural integrity. This means your mattress is essentially a bag full of thousands of tiny, golden tubes that crunch, snap, and poke. As you lower your heavy, wool-wrapped body onto this pallet, the first thing you notice is the sound. There is no stealth in a medieval bed. Every movement you make is accompanied by a loud, dry rustling, like walking through autumn leaves. If you roll over, it sounds like a brush fire. If you sit up, it sounds like a tree falling. In a small, silent hut where the rest of your family is trying to sleep, turning over is a public announcement. You learn to lie very still, not just for warmth, but to avoid waking the baby, the dog, and the grandparents with the cacophony of your own bedding. But the noise is the least of your worries. The real issue is the migration. Straw is fluid. Over the course of the night, the weight of your body pushes the straw away from your heavy points, your hips and shoulders, and displaces it to the edges of the sack. You start the night on a fluffy cloud. You end the night lying in a crater with only 2 layers of canvas separating your hip bone from the hard earth or wooden slats below. This is why making the bed in the morning isn't just about tidying up. It is a necessary act of re-engineering. You have to reach into the sack or pummel it from the outside to redistribute the filling, fluffing it back into a vaguely human-shaped nest. If you are lucky, your pallet is raised off the floor on a simple wooden frame with rope netting strung across it. This is a game changer. It gets you off the damp dirt floor, away from the drafts sweeping the ground, and away from the rats that scuttle along the perimeter walls. The ropes provide a bit of suspension, a primitive spring system, but rope stretches. Over time, your bed begins to sag in the middle, turning into a hammock that forces you and your spouse to roll inevitably into the center, colliding in a heap of tangled limbs and wool. Tightening the bed ropes is a regular chore. Historically, this is where the phrase "sleep tight" likely comes from, referring to the tension of the ropes, not the snugness of the sheets. However, if you are less fortunate, your mattress is right on the floor. Maybe you have a layer of bracken or heather underneath it to act as a moisture barrier, but effectively, you are camping. The cold from the earth seeps up through the bottom of the mattress, engaging in a war of attrition with the heat from your body. You can feel the geological chill radiating into your back, a constant reminder that the ground is frozen 3 feet down. Now let's talk about the roommates. You are never sleeping alone in a medieval bed, even if you are the only human in it. Your mattress is a thriving ecosystem of biodiversity. It is a metropolis for fleas, lice, and bedbugs. These aren't an infestation, they are a feature. In an era without vacuum cleaners or pesticides, keeping a straw mattress bug-free is impossible. The hollow stalks of straw are perfect condominiums for fleas. They hide inside the tubes by day and come out to feast on your ankles by night. You have likely developed a sort of truce with them. You are covered in so much wool and linen that they have to work hard to get to your skin. But you will feel them. You will feel the sudden, sharp prick of a bite just as you are drifting off. It is annoying, but it is standard. It's like hearing a mosquito buzz in a modern tent. Irritating, but part of the experience. You might scratch absently in your sleep, your fingernails rasping against the coarse fabric of your tunic. To combat this, you employ herbal warfare. You might stuff your mattress with specific plants known to repel insects. Ladies' bed straw, Galium verum, is a yellow flowering plant that, when dried, smells like new mown hay and contains a chemical compound that kills fleas. Wormwood, mint, and tansy are also popular additives. So, your bed smells like a weird salad of medicinal herbs. It's a pleasant, earthy aromatherapy that tries desperately to mask the smell of the unwashed bodies and the stale straw. Mainstream history often overlooks the maintenance required for these beds. You can't just use the same straw forever. It breaks down. It gets pulverized into dust by your tossing and turning. It gets damp from the humidity of the house. Eventually, it starts to rot. A responsible peasant changes the straw in their mattress at least once a year, usually after the harvest, when fresh straw is abundant. That first night on fresh straw is glorious. It smells sweet, it's high and fluffy, and the flea population hasn't had time to move in yet. It is the medieval equivalent of checking into a 5-star hotel. But right now, in the dead of winter, your straw is months old. It is flat, dusty, and well populated. There is a scholarly debate about the sleeping posture of medieval people. Some evidence from later periods suggests people slept semi-upright, propped up by high pillows to aid digestion and avoid death-like poses. However, for a peasant like you, exhausted from 12 hours of manual labor in the freezing cold, you likely don't care about posture. You collapse. You curl into a fetal ball to conserve heat. You are a biological knot. Occasionally, you might feel something larger than a flea moving in the mattress. A mouse. The straw is warm, and mice are cold. Sometimes they chew a hole in the canvas and nest inside the bedding itself. There is nothing quite like the sensation of a small, furry lump wriggling under your kidney at 2:00 a.m. You might smack the spot with your fist, hear a squeak, and then go back to sleep. In the hierarchy of winter threats, a mouse is low on the list. Unless it starts chewing your hair for nesting material, it can stay. It adds warmth, after all. You also have to navigate the topography of the bedmates. We will get to the social dynamics of communal sleeping in a bit, but physically, the mattress is a landscape of human obstacles. You are sharing this limited, lumpy real estate with others. You have to find a groove that fits your body without elbowing your sister or kicking your spouse. It is a puzzle of limbs. Once you find your spot, you lock it in. You do not move. Moving breaks the seal of warmth. Moving lets the cold air into the pocket you have created. You stay frozen in position, even if your arm falls asleep, because a numb arm is better than a frozen body. The dust is another factor. Every time you move, clouds of fine straw dust puff up through the weave of the canvas. You breathe this in. It coats the back of your throat. It contributes to that chronic cough we mentioned earlier. Your bed is actively attacking your respiratory system, but it is a soft, warm attack, so you forgive it. As you lie there, feeling the prickle of a stray straw poking through the canvas and your linen shirt, listening to the rustle of the dry stalks and the wind howling outside, you realize that comfort is a relative term. This sack of grass is the most comfortable place in the world right now because it is yours and it is, relatively, dry. You sink into the lumps. You let the smell of dried mint and old dust fill your nose. You accept the fleas as the price of admission. You are part of the ecosystem now. You are just the largest, warmest thing in the food chain of the mattress. And as the heat from the hot stone at your feet begins to fade, you burrow deeper, hoping the straw will hold onto your warmth just long enough for you to drift away. As you settle into your lumpy, flea-ridden mattress, you might feel crowded. But if you lift your head and peer into the gloom at the other end of the hut, you will see, and definitely smell, that you are merely the minority species in this establishment. You are not just sleeping in a house, you are sleeping in a barn. In the architectural tradition of the longhouse, or byre dwelling, common across medieval Europe, the separation between human living space and an animal stable is often just a shallow drainage ditch in the dirt floor or a flimsy, knee-high wooden partition. Tonight, that lack of separation is the only thing keeping you from freezing to death. You have roommates with hooves, and they are the best central heating system money can buy. The MVP of your thermal survival strategy is the cow. Or, if you are relatively prosperous, perhaps 2 cows. A full-grown dairy cow has a body temperature of about 101 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. She is a massive, chewing, ruminating radiator. She generates an immense amount of body heat simply by existing and digesting grass. By keeping her inside the house with you, you are trapping those BTUs within the wattle and daub walls. The difference in temperature between a hut with a cow and a hut without one can be 10 to 15 degrees. That is the difference between shivering all night and actually getting some sleep. But inviting a 1,000-pound animal into your bedroom comes with logistical challenges. First, there is the humidity. A cow exhales gallons of moisture into the air every day. In the cold winter night, this moisture condenses. The walls of your house will glisten with dampness. The air feels heavy, thick, and tropical, but in a swampy, barnyard sort of way. You are effectively sleeping in a very smelly steam room. The thatch above you creates a humid microclimate where fungus thrives, but again, wet and warm is better than dry and dead. Then there is the sound. Cows are loud sleepers. They don't just lie there, they process. You will drift off to the rhythmic, wet sound of cud chewing, a sloshing, grinding noise that acts as a peculiar form of medieval white noise. Occasionally, the cow will heave a deep, heavy sigh, shifting her weight on the straw, causing the ground to tremble slightly. It is a comforting sound, a reminder that the most expensive thing you own is safe and sound, right there in the room with you. This brings us to a significant scholarly debate regarding these byre dwellings. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for bringing animals indoors was actually heat conservation or if it was security. In a time of famine and lawlessness, cattle rustling was a real threat. A cow left in an outdoor shed could be stolen in the night, dooming your family to starvation. By keeping the cow inside, you ensure that no one can steal her without literally stepping on you first. It's a dual-purpose system. The cow protects you from the cold, and you protect the cow from thieves. It is a symbiotic security pact. But the cow isn't the only guest. If you have a pig, it is definitely indoors too. Pigs are incredibly intelligent and heat-seeking. A pig will not respectfully stay in the animal end of the house. A pig will try to join the human pile. It is not unheard of for a peasant to wake up and find the family pig snuggled up against their back, sharing the body heat. While this is efficient, pigs are also chaotic. They root around, they grunt, and they have no respect for personal space. But a pig is basically a hot water bottle with an attitude, so you tolerate it. And then looking up, you have the chickens. They are roosting in the rafters above your head because heat rises, and they want to be where the warm air pools near the roof. This adds a vertical dimension to your peril. Sleeping under a roosting chicken is a game of chance that you will eventually lose. The lucky drop from above is just a fact of life. You might pull your hood up a little tighter or cover your face with your arm. The chickens also provide a gentle, murmuring commentary throughout the night, a soft clucking that says, "We are warm, we are safe. Now, we must address the elephant, or rather the manure, in the room. The smell. You have sealed the house to keep the drafts out, which means you have also sealed the smells in. You are trapping the methane, the ammonia, and the general funk of livestock in a small, unventilated space. To a modern nose, walking into this house would be like getting punched in the face by a fertilizer factory. Your eyes would water, your throat would close up. But remember that nose blindness we talked about? It applies here tenfold. You associate this smell with safety. The sharp tang of ammonia means the animals are alive and producing. There is even a quirky, fringe medical belief associated with this environment. In later centuries, and likely with roots in medieval folklore, the breath of a cow was considered medicinal. Physicians believed that inhaling the sweet, grassy breath of a cow could cure consumption, tuberculosis, and in other lung ailments. So, as you lie there, breathing in the recycled air of a bovine, you aren't just getting warm, you are technically taking a spa treatment for your lungs. The fact that the smoke from the fire is simultaneously destroying your lungs is a bit of irony that medieval medicine hadn't quite worked out yet. The floor management is crucial here. The animal end of the house usually has a slight slope or a drain leading under the wall to the outside, ostensibly to carry away the liquid waste. In reality, in the dead of winter, that drain might freeze or clog. So the floor on that side of the room becomes a slurry. You learn very quickly not to walk to that side of the room in the dark without your wooden clogs. It is a no-go zone. The boundary line between bedroom and stable is invisible but strictly enforced by the squelch factor. There is also the heat generated by the decomposition of the bedding. The straw and manure on the animal side of the room essentially begin to compost. As any gardener knows, a compost pile generates heat, sometimes up to 140 degrees in the center. While your floor isn't quite that hot, the chemical breakdown of the animal waste adds another layer of passive heating to the room. You are sleeping inside a biological engine powered by digestion and decomposition. It is gross, yes, but it is brilliantly effective. However, sharing your room with livestock introduces parasites that make your bed fleas look like amateurs. Ticks, mites, and ringworm are part of the package. You might wake up with a circular red rash on your arm, a gift from the cow. But in the grand calculus of survival, a skin fungus is preferable to hypothermia. You scratch the itch and move on. As the night deepens, the breathing of the animals syncs with the breathing of the family. There is a profound sense of unity. You are not separate from nature. You are huddled inside it. The cow chewing her cud, the pig snoring, and they do snore loudly like old men, the chickens shifting on the beams. It creates a sense of a packed, living ark floating through the dark ocean of winter. You might worry about the danger. A startled cow could kick out and shatter a shin bone. A panicked pig could bite. But these animals are domesticated to a degree we can barely understand today. They are family members. They know your voice. They know your smell. In the dark, the cow is a gentle giant, a massive presence that anchors the room. Her body blocks the draft from the back wall. Her breath creates a cloud of steam that hangs in the air, softening the sharp, dry cold. So you lie there, listening to the munch, munch, munch of the cow and the rustle of the straw. The air is thick, pungent, and warm. You are part of the herd tonight. In the hierarchy of the universe, you are just another mammal trying to keep its blood liquid. And as the cow lets out a long, low moo in her sleep, vibrating the very air in the small hut, you feel a strange sense of gratitude. She is your radiator, your security system, and your savings account, all wrapped in a hairy, smelly package. And she is the reason you will wake up in the morning. The fire is banked, the drafts are plugged with moss, the hot stones are cooling in your straw pallet, and the cow is chewing her cud in the corner. But there is one final, critical piece of the thermal puzzle remaining: the formation. You are not going to sleep alone. Privacy, in the medieval sense, is not just a luxury you cannot afford. It is a concept that barely exists. Tonight, you are entering the communal sleep pile, a highly strategic, socially complex arrangement of human bodies designed to share every possible BTU of heat. In the modern world, sharing a bed is often seen as an intimate act reserved for couples or small children. In your world, it is a survival mechanism. The bed is not a place for romance. It is a life raft. Everyone in the household, parents, children, grandparents, perhaps an aunt who never married, and occasionally a traveling peddler who needed a roof for the night, climbs into the same bed. Or, if the bed is too small, they create a secondary pile on the floor. The goal is to eliminate surface area exposed to the cold air. A single human body loses heat to the room from all sides. A human body pressed between two other human bodies loses heat only from the top and bottom. It is basic geometry. You have likely heard the nursery rhyme, "There were 10 in the bed, and the little one said, 'Roll over, roll over.'" That is not a cute song. It is a documentary about the logistical nightmare of peasant sleeping arrangements. The formation is usually hierarchical. The parents take the center, the prime real estate. They are the core of the nuclear reactor, insulated on both sides. The youngest and most vulnerable children are tucked in next to them. The older children, the teenagers, and the elderly are relegated to the edges, the buffer zones. Being on the edge is the worst shift. One side of you is warm, pressed against your brother's back. The other side is facing the freezing darkness of the room. This is why there is often a rotation. If you wake up shivering on the edge, you might whisper and shove until someone lets you wiggle into the middle. The pile is a dynamic, shifting organism. Strangers add a layer of awkwardness that we moderns can scarcely imagine. Hospitality is a sacred duty in the Middle Ages, but it is also a practical necessity. If a traveler knocks on your door in a blizzard, you let them in. And because you don't have a guest room, they sleep in the pile with you. You might find yourself back to back with a complete stranger, sharing body heat with a man you met 3 hours ago over a bowl of turnips. You don't ask questions. You just accept the warmth. This practice was so common that there were entire books of etiquette written, mostly for the upper classes, but the rules filtered down about how to behave in a shared bed. Don't thrash around. Keep your hands to yourself, and for the love of God, don't hog the blanket. But the most fascinating aspect of the sleep pile is the bundling technique. To maintain modesty and to prevent any unsanctioned hanky-panky in a bed full of people, heavier barriers might be placed between certain sleepers. A long wooden board, called a bundling board, might be slid between a courting couple or between strangers and the family daughters. It's a physical partition within the bed itself. Sometimes, people were sewn into sacks or wrapped tightly in their own individual blankets before being piled together. You are essentially distinct burritos in a communal bowl. There is a mainstream historical fact that often surprises people. Entire families sometimes slept naked together. As we discussed earlier, In the deep winter, you likely keep your clothes on, but in slightly milder conditions or in better insulated homes, stripping down allowed for direct skin to skin heat transfer, which is scientifically more efficient. However, the church had a lot to say about this. Priests regularly sermonized against the moral dangers of the communal bed, warning that it led to incest and sin. But theology tends to lose arguments against hypothermia. When it's 10 degrees below zero, you care less about the Pope's opinion and more about not freezing your toes off. Historians still argue about the sleep patterns within these groups. Did everyone sleep at the same time? Roger Akersh's famous theory of segmented sleep suggests that people slept in 2 shifts, first sleep and second sleep, with a waking period of an hour or so in between to pray, talk, or tend the fire. In a communal pile, this creates a ripple effect. If Uncle Egbert wakes up for his midnight prayer and starts muttering, everyone wakes up. If the baby cries, the entire bed is awake. The sleep pile breathes and wakes as a single unit. It is a collective consciousness. The sensory experience of this pile is intense. You are inhaling the breath of 5 other people. You are smelling their wool, their sweat, their pottage breath. You are acutely aware of everyone's digestive status. If someone has gas, there is nowhere to run. The blanket traps it all. You become intimately familiar with the nocturnal habits of your family, who grinds their teeth, who talks in their sleep, who kicks. You develop a psychological filter, a way of tuning out the human noise, just as you tune out the cow chewing in the corner. But there is also a profound sense of security. In a world full of terrifying things, wolves, bandits, demons, plague, being physically pressed against your kin is deeply reassuring. You can feel their hearts beating. You know they are alive. If someone stops breathing or burns up with a fever, you know instantly. The sleep pile is a monitoring system. It creates a bond that is hard for us to understand in our era of individual bedrooms and personal space. You are literally keeping each other alive with your own bodies. Sometimes, the arrangement includes the dogs. If you have a hunting dog or a shepherd's cur, they are invited into the pile, usually at the foot of the bed. Hence the phrase, a 3-dog night. A night so cold you need 3 dogs to keep you warm. Dogs run hotter than humans, about 101-102 degrees, similar to the cow. A dog curled behind your knees is a heater that loves you. They also serve as the first line of defense against the fleas, acting as a flea trap that draws the insects away from your skin. As the night settles in, the pile stops squirming. The breathing synchronizes. The heat builds up under the heavy wool covers, tattered blankets, maybe an old bearskin if you're lucky, or a coverlet made of patchwork rags. The temperature inside the bed creates a pocket of survival that defies the freezing room. You are a human radiator, a multi-celled organism of warmth. You lie there, wedged between your snoring father and your tossing younger sister, feeling the weight of the collective cover and the heat of the bodies around you. You can hear the wind howling outside, trying to find a gap in the walls you patched with dung. You can hear the frost cracking the trees in the forest. But in here, in the center of the pile, You are safe. You are warm. You surrender your individuality to the group. You are no longer just a person. You are a brick in the wall of heat. And as you drift off, you realize that while you might be poor, while you might be hungry, you are not alone. And in the dark of winter, that is everything. You are now wedged firmly into the communal sleep pile, a single brick in a wall of snoring humanity. Your body is insulated, your bed is preheated, mostly, and your perimeter is secured by livestock. But there is one part of you that remains dangerously exposed to the freezing air of the room: your face, specifically your nose and mouth. Every time you inhale, you are drawing a lungful of sub-zero air directly into your core. Every time you exhale, you are blowing a cloud of precious body heat out into the void. You are essentially a leaking valve in the thermal system. To survive the night without waking up with a hacking cough, or not waking up at all, you must master the subtle art of survival breathing. In the modern world, we are told to take deep, cleansing breaths. Yoga instructors and meditation apps encourage us to fill our lungs to capacity. Tonight, in your freezing hut, that is terrible advice. A deep breath of air at this temperature feels like inhaling broken glass. It shocks the bronchial tubes and cools the blood circulating through your lungs, which then travels straight to your heart, lowering your core temperature from the inside out. You need to do the opposite. You need to breathe shallowly. You instinctively adopt a technique that hunters and travelers use in the high mountains. You keep your mouth firmly shut. Breathing through the mouth is a rookie mistake. The mouth is a giant cavern that lets cold air rush in unchecked. The nose, however, is a brilliant piece of biological engineering. The nasal passages are lined with turbinates, bony structures covered in vascular tissue that act as a heat exchange system. As the cold air travels through the winding tunnels of your nose, it is warmed and humidified before it ever hits your sensitive lungs. By the time it reaches your throat, it has been tempered from deadly frost to chilly breeze. So you breathe exclusively through your nose. But not just normal breathing. You take small, sipping breaths. You try to move the air as little as possible. It is a form of hibernation breathing. You want to maintain a pocket of warm, carbon dioxide-rich air right in front of your face. This is where the blanket comes in. You pull the rough wool cover or the edge of your cloak up over your nose, leaving only your eyes exposed. In extreme cold, you might pull it all the way over your head, creating a Dutch oven effect. This creates a microclimate around your face. You are rebreathing your own exhaust. To a modern hygienist, this sounds like a recipe for oxygen deprivation and bacterial growth. To you, it is a life-saving strategy. The air trapped under the blanket is warm and moist. Yes, it smells like the feet of the person sleeping next to you, and yes, it is stale, but it is warm. You are recycling the heat you just lost. You are creating a buffer zone between your delicate lung tissue and the aggressive cold of the room. However, there is a distinct downside to this turtle technique: condensation. As you breathe warm, moist air into the wool fabric covering your face, the moisture condenses and freezes. Over the course of the night, A crust of ice forms on the blanket right where your mouth is. You might wake up with your beard, if you have one, frozen to the coverlet. You have to gently break the ice seal to turn your head. It is a gross, crunchy reality. The fabric becomes stiff and wet, a cold compress resting on your lips, but it's still better than the alternative. There is a quirky, physiological trick you might not even realize you are doing. When exposed to extreme cold, your body undergoes vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your nose and throat tighten to preserve heat. This makes your nose feel dry and painful. To combat this, you might subconsciously bury your nose in the crook of your arm or against the shoulder of the person next to you. You are using their body heat to keep your intake valve from freezing shut. It is a parasitic form of snuggling. Historians still argue about the prevalence of respiratory diseases in these conditions. While we know that pneumonia and bronchitis were major killers, some theories suggest that the constant exposure to wood smoke from the open hearth might have actually toughened the lungs of survivors, or at least coated them in a layer of protective tar. It's a grim thought. Your lungs are either frozen or smoked, but the fact that you are here, an adult peasant, means you have the iron lungs of a survivor. You have learned to breathe the thin, sharp air without triggering a coughing fit that would wake the entire house. There is also a meditative aspect to this shallow breathing. It slows your heart rate. It calms your mind. In the silence of the night, your focus narrows to the simple rhythm of air in, air out. You become hyper-aware of the temperature gradient. You can feel the cold trying to invade your nostrils, and you push it back with a slow, controlled exhalation. It is a battle fought in inches, right at the tip of your nose. You listen to the breathing of the others in the bed, the heavy snorts of your father, the whistling breath of your grandmother, the soft puffs of the children. It is a symphony of respiratory survival. You can tell who is cold by the speed of their breathing. Rapid, shallow breaths mean someone is shivering. Slow, deep breaths mean someone has successfully reached the warm equilibrium of sleep. You try to match your rhythm to the slowest breather in the group, syncing your biology with the herd. Sometimes, the air is so cold that you can see your breath even in the dark, a faint, ghostly plume rising from the bed. It looks like the soul escaping the body. You try to suppress it, to keep that ghost inside. You tuck your chin down, burying your face in the warmth of your own chest. You adopt the posture of a bird sleeping with its head under its wing. There is a mainstream historical fact here that is often forgotten. The nightcap wasn't just a fashion statement. The long, conical hat with a tassel that we associate with Wee Willie Winkie or Scrooge had a function. If you pulled it down low enough, the thick wool band covered your ears and forehead, and the long tail could be wrapped around your neck like a scarf or even pulled across your face as a muffler. It was a wearable breathing filter. If you have one, you have likely wrapped it across your mouth like a bandit, filtering the ice out of the air. But the most important part of survival breathing is mental. If you panic, if you start to hyperventilate because you hear a wolf howl or a timber crack, you will die. Hyperventilation flushes CO2 from your blood and cools you down rapidly. You have to stay calm. You have to trust the pile, trust the walls, and trust your own breath. You take a tiny sip of air through your nose, warm it in your sinuses, let it drift into your lungs, and then push it out slowly, letting the warm exhaust heat the space under the blanket. You are a biological furnace, but you have to damper the chimney. You have to keep the heat inside. And as you lie there, feeling the ice crystals forming on the wool next to your lips, listening to the wind trying to suck the life out of your home, you realize that the simple act of breathing is a victory. Every breath is a defiance of the winter. You are stealing oxygen from the cold and turning it into life. You are winning the war, one shallow, controlled sniff at a time. Just as you manage to drift into that shallow, frozen approximation of sleep, a hand shakes your shoulder. It is a rude, jarring awakening. The air in the room is pitch black and quiet, save for the rhythmic chewing of the cow. You peel your eyes open, your eyelashes sticky with sleep, and realize with a sinking heart that it is your turn. The night shift has begun. In a house heated solely by a temperamental fire pit, sleeping through the night in one continuous block is a luxury you cannot afford. If the fire dies completely, the temperature in the hut will plummet to dangerous levels within an hour. The banking process we discussed earlier is good, but it isn't perfect. Someone needs to check the patient. Someone needs to ensure the heart of the house is still beating. Tonight, that someone is you. You extricate yourself from the warm, communal pile. This is a moment of pure physical sacrifice. You are peeling yourself away from the collective body heat of your family, a human Velcro strip of warmth, and stepping out into the hostile void of the room. The cold hits you instantly. It feels physical, like a slap. The air is stagnant and frigid, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. You stumble toward the hearth in the center of the room. You can't see much, perhaps just a faint red glow seeping through the cracks of the ash pile. You grab the iron poker or a sturdy stick and gently, very gently, rake back the gray ash. This is the moment of truth. If you see a dull, angry orange eye winking back at you, you are safe. If it's dark, panic sets in, and you have to scramble to blow on the faint sparks before they vanish forever. Thankfully, tonight, the embers are alive. You feed them a midnight snack. Not a full log that would blaze up too high and waste fuel, but a few pieces of dry brushwood or a chunk of peat. You blow softly. The glow brightens. A small blue flame licks up, casting long, dancing shadows on the wattle walls. The room breathes a sigh of relief. You have bought another 3 hours of warmth. This nocturnal interruption isn't just a chore, it is a recognized part of medieval timekeeping. As we mentioned, people often slept in 2 shifts. This waking period, the watch, is a time of strange, quiet intimacy. You are the guardian of the household. While the others sleep, you are the only conscious being, except maybe the cow, standing between your family and the freeze. Sometimes, you aren't the only one awake. Maybe your grandmother is up, sitting on a stool by the fire, nursing her aching joints in the warmth. Maybe your spouse wakes up too. In the silence of the 3 o'clock a.m. watch, when the work of the farm is paused and the children are asleep, you might actually talk. This is the only privacy you get. You whisper about the grain stores, about the rumors of war, about the neighbor's new pig. It is a stolen hour of connection in a life dominated by relentless labor. Or perhaps you use this time for solitary tasks. In the faint light of the revived fire, you might spin a little wool, mend a broken tool handle, or check on a sick lamb brought indoors. It is a time of low-stakes productivity. The world outside is dead and frozen, but in here, life continues in a hush. There is a mainstream historical fact that aligns with this. Medieval monasteries had a similar rhythm. Monks woke up for matins and lauds in the middle of the night. Your peasant life mirrors this, but instead of praying for the soul of the world, you are praying that the roof doesn't leak and the fire doesn't die. It is a liturgy of survival. You might also take this opportunity to do a perimeter check. You walk to the door, stepping carefully over the sleeping dogs. You check the bundle of rags pushed against the threshold. Is it wet? Is the snow drifting in? You might crack the door open just a hair, an act of masochism, to check the weather. The blast of wind that hits you is shocking, confirming that yes, the world is still trying to kill you. You slam it shut and re-secure the latch. The contrast makes the smoky, smelly hut feel like a palace. You check the animals. You pat the cow's flank. She is warm, solid, reassuring. You might toss her a handful of hay to keep her furnace stoked. If the water bucket has a layer of ice on it, you break it so the animals can drink. These small acts of maintenance are the invisible glue holding the farm together. But the cold eventually seeps through your layers. Your feet, which were warm in the bed, are now blocks of ice on the dirt floor. Your hands are stiff. The fire is settling down again. Its job done for now. It is time to return to the pile. Getting back into bed is a delicate operation. The spot you vacated has cooled down. The seal of the blankets has been broken. You have to worm your way back into the mass of limbs. You are a cold foreign object re-entering the ecosystem. Your spouse might groan as your freezing feet touch their legs. You whisper an apology, shivering violently as your body tries to recalibrate. You curl up, tucking your hands into your armpits, waiting for the collective heat of the group to thaw you out. It takes a few minutes. You lie there, wide awake, listening to the wind, feeling the adrenaline of the cold fade into the heavy fatigue of the night. You have done your duty. The fire is safe. The family is safe. This rotation happens every night, all winter long. It is a relay race against entropy. You, your parents, your older siblings, you pass the baton of vigilance. You never get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. You sleep in shifts, in snatched moments, always with one ear cocked for the sound of a dying fire or a distressed animal. And as you drift off for your second sleep, you might have a strange dream. A dream of a world where fires burn forever, without wood, where light comes from glass bulbs without smoke, and where houses stay warm even when everyone is asleep. It seems like a fantasy, a ridiculous utopia, But then again, maybe it's just the fever dream of a peasant who has eaten too many turnips. You push the thought away, burrow deeper into the straw, and let the darkness take you again. You have banked the fire, plugged the drafts, layered your body, and synced your breathing with the family pile. You have done everything physically possible to survive the night. But as you lie there in the crushing blackness, listening to the wind shriek around on the corners of your hut like a wounded animal, a different kind of chill settles in. It is the chill of the unknown. To your medieval mind, winter isn't just a meteorological phenomenon caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis. It is a spiritual siege. The cold is not merely an absence of heat. It is a malevolent presence, a living force that wants to get in. And against that kind of enemy, a wool blanket is useless. You need spiritual armor. In the modern world, you might check the locks on your doors to feel safe from intruders. In 1325, your locks are made of faith, superstition, and a little bit of magic. If you were to light a rushlight and inspect the timber beams of your house, specifically around the fireplace and the doorframe, you would see the physical evidence of your anxiety. Carved into the wood are strange geometric symbols. These are apotropaic marks, or more commonly, witch marks. You or your father likely spent hours scratching these designs with a knife. The most common is the daisy wheel, a 6-petaled flower drawn with a compass. It looks like a simple decoration, but to you, it is a demon trap. The theory is that an evil spirit, driven by the cold wind, will enter the house, see the complex line work, and be compelled to follow the lines. It gets confused, running round and round the petals forever, unable to escape the pattern and enter your lungs to give you pneumonia. It is essentially a spiritual maze for dumb ghosts. Then there are the burn marks. You might see teardrop-shaped burns on the mantelpiece, deliberately made with a candle. These aren't accidents, they are inoculations for the house. By burning the wood slightly, in a controlled way, you are telling the spirits of fire, look, this house has already burned, you can move along. It is a way of tricking the element of fire into sparing your roof. But the heavy artillery of your spiritual defense comes from the church. January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, was a critical day for your home security. On this day, the local priest would have blessed chunks of chalk. You brought a piece of this holy chalk home. It probably sits on a high shelf, treated like a nugget of gold. With this chalk, you have written a specific formula above your door. 20 plus C plus M plus B plus 25, representing the year and the initials of the 3 kings, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. This isn't just graffiti, it is a contract. The letters also stand for the Latin phrase, Christus mansionem benedicat, may Christ bless this house. You believe with absolute sincerity that this chalk line creates an invisible barrier that the frost giants, the wandering spirits of the unbaptized, and the wild hunt cannot cross. When the wind rattles the door latch, you don't panic because the chalk is holding the line. Speaking of the wild hunt, this is the soundtrack to your nightmares. When the winter gale howls through the bare branches of the forest, you don't hear aerodynamics. You hear the baying of phantom hounds and the hoofbeats of a ghostly hunting party led by Odin or perhaps Herod, or even the devil himself. They fly through the winter sky, sweeping up the souls of the unwary. If you hear the wind intensify, you might pull the covers up over your head and whisper a quick Pater Noster, Our Father. You certainly don't look out the window. To see the hunt is to be engaged by it. Ignorance is safety. You also have a specific roster of saints on speed dial for winter ailments. If your throat starts to tickle, the dreaded precursor to the quinsy or diphtheria, you pray immediately to Saint Blaise. He is the patron saint of throat illnesses. You might touch your neck and mutter a plea for his intercession, perhaps visualizing the crossed candles used on his feast day. If you are terrified of the fire going out or getting too big, you appeal to Saint Anthony or Saint Florian. These saints are your celestial shift workers, specialized consultants for specific medieval problems. But here is where things get murky and where historians love to debate. While you are a devout Christian who goes to Mass and pays your tithe, your home security system is heavily syncretic, a blend of church doctrine and much older pagan habits. Deep down, you aren't just worried about demons. You are worried about the good neighbors, the fair folk, or the domovoi, house spirit. These aren't the cute fairies of Victorian storybooks. They are capricious, dangerous entities that live in the hearth or the barn. So, despite the famine, despite the fact that your belly is grumbling, you might have left a tiny offering before bed. A thimbleful of milk left on the hearthstone, a crust of bread hidden in the rafters. This is a bribe. You are paying protection money to the house spirit so that it doesn't curdle the milk, lame the cow, or let the fire die in the night. The priest would call this idolatry, but the priest sleeps in a stone rectory next to the church. You live in a mud hut on the edge of the woods. You are hedging your bets. You pray to Jesus for your soul, but you feed the goblin for your survival. Scholars still argue about how aware the church was of these practices. Did they turn a blind eye to the witch marks and the milk bowls? Probably. As long as you showed up on Sunday, what you did in the dark to keep the frost away was your own business. It was a pragmatic tolerance. There is a psychological rhythm to these prayers and rituals. In a world where you have zero control over the elements, where a sudden drop in temperature can literally kill you in your sleep, these rituals give you a sense of agency. When you trace the sign of the cross on your pillow before laying your head down, you are performing a mental closing of the shop. You are engaging in a soothing, repetitive behavior that calms the nervous system. You might hear your grandmother muttering in the dark. She is reciting the rosary, or a local folk variation of it, counting on her knotted fingers. The rhythm of the Latin words, mumbled over and over, acts as a lullaby for the whole room. Ave Maria, gratia plena. It is a drone, a hum that competes with the wind. It transforms the terrifying emptiness of the night into a structured, sacred space. It is the medieval equivalent of white noise or a guided meditation app. Sometimes you might clutch a physical object for protection, a touch relic. Maybe you have a small pouch around your neck containing a scrap of paper with a prayer written on it, or a piece of moss from a holy well, or a bent coin. You hold it tight in your fist. It gives you something tangible to anchor you to the world of the living. And let's not forget the seining of the house. In some regions, before bed, the father might take a burning branch from the fire and walk the perimeter of the room, waving the smoke into the corners. This is practical. Smoke bothers insects, but primarily spiritual. It is using the purifying power of fire to chase the shadows back. The smell of the smoke hanging in the air is the smell of a consecrated space. As the night stretches on and the cold deepens, these fears become less sharp and more dreamlike. The wind no longer sounds like a hunting horn. It just sounds like the world breathing. The witch marks on the wall are watching over you. The chalk on the door is glowing in the spiritual spectrum. You have done your part. You have filed the paperwork with the saints. You have paid off the house spirits, and you have fortified the walls with holy graffiti. You are suspended in a web of belief that holds you safe above the abyss of the frozen dark. You feel a strange, paradoxical peace. You are small, you are fragile, and you are surrounded by monsters, but you are also protected by a fortress of invisible forces. Your faith is the final layer of insulation, warmer than wool and stronger than mud. And with that thought, clutching your bent coin and listening to the rhythmic muttering of your grandmother, you finally allow yourself to surrender to the void. The first sign that the ordeal is over does not come from your eyes, but from your ears. Deep in the subconscious fog of the sleep pile, a sound cuts through the silence. It is the rooster. Not the poetic, golden-throated chanticleer of storybooks, but a ragged, angry shriek from the rafters above your head. He is cold, he is annoyed, and he wants everyone else to be awake too. This is the medieval alarm clock, and unlike a smartphone, it has no snooze button. You can't swipe left on a rooster, you just have to get up. You open your eyes, and for a moment, panic sets in. The darkness is still heavy, but looking toward the window, that tiny slit covered in stretched animal hide, you see a faint, milky grayness. It is the wolf light, the ambiguous hour between night and day. You take a breath. It hurts. The air is still freezing, perhaps even colder than when you went to bed, as the pre-dawn hour is often the coldest. But you are breathing. You wiggle your toes inside the wool hose. They are numb, stiff, and unresponsive, like wooden pegs attached to your ankles. But after a few seconds of desperate flexing, a dull ache sets in. Pain is good. Pain means blood is flowing. Pain means you still have toes. You lie there for a moment, savoring the warmth of the pile one last time. This is the most dangerous moment for morale. The temptation to just stay there, to refuse to face the biting air, is overwhelming. But you hear the shifting of the bodies around you. Your father coughs, a wet, rattling sound that is as familiar to you as his voice. Your sister murmurs something in her sleep. The cow shifts her weight with a heavy grunt. The hive is waking up. The collective organism is breaking apart into individuals again. You sit up. The movement causes the dried mud and dust from your hair to cascade down your shoulders. Your joints pop and crack like dry twigs. You feel like a rusted suit of armor. There is a mainstream historical fact that fits this moment perfectly: life expectancy. While statistics are skewed by high infant mortality, if you survive childhood, you could live into your 60s. But those later years were often defined by profound stiffness. You are only in your 20s, but your back feels 80. You are paying the physical tax of sleeping on a sack of straw in a damp room. You slide out of the bed, your feet hitting the dirt floor. If you thought the floor was cold last night, it is now a slab of cryogenically frozen earth. You do a little dance, hopping from foot to foot, trying to minimize contact time. You move immediately to the hearth. This is the morning ritual that defines your day. You rake back the ashes you carefully piled up hours ago. If you did your job right during the night shift, there is still a faint red pulse deep inside. You add a handful of straw, then blow. The smoke hits your face, stinging your eyes, waking you up faster than caffeine ever could. The straw catches. A yellow flame leaps up. The shadows retreat. The house has a heart again. Now begins the damage assessment. You walk to the water bucket near the door. It is frozen solid. You have to take the handle of a ladle or a knife and hack through an inch of ice to get to the liquid water below. You splash some on your face, not to clean, as we established, but to shock your system into alertness. The cold water feels like liquid fire on your skin. You look at your hands. They are swollen and red, covered in chilblains, painful, itchy swellings caused by the constant exposure to cold and damp. They are the battle scars of winter. You might rub them with a bit of goose grease or turnip mash if you have any left, but mostly you just ignore them. A quirky medical tidbit from your time suggests that rubbing snow on frostbitten fingers is a cure. Thankfully, you are too cold to go outside and find snow right now, avoiding further damage to your tissues. Then comes the social check. You look around the room as the family emerges from the covers. Everyone looks disheveled, wild-eyed, and gray-faced in the dim light. But you do a silent head count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone is moving. The baby is crying, a glorious sound, because it means the baby is alive. The old dog stretches and shakes, sending a cloud of dust into the air. You have all made it. You have survived the siege. There is a quiet, unspoken nod exchanged between the adults. Another night down. January is one day shorter. Historians still argue about the psychological state of the medieval peasant. Was it a life of unremitting misery and depression, or was there a resilience and joy that we miss in the dry records of famine and plague? Looking at you now, blowing on your hands by the fire, cracking a joke about the rooster's timing, it seems clear. It wasn't misery. It was endurance. It was a life lived close to the bone, where the simple fact of waking up was a victory worth celebrating. You aren't depressed about the cold. You are proud of beating it. You step to the door and unbar it. The latch is frozen. You have to force it. With a loud creak, the wood gives way, and you push the door open. The morning light floods in, blindingly white. The world outside has been transformed. The mud, The muck, the manure pile, it is all covered in a pristine, glittering blanket of fresh snow. It is breathtakingly beautiful. For a second, you forget the hunger and the itchiness. You just stare at the silent white forest. You step out to relieve yourself, your breath puffing in the crisp air like a steam engine. The cold is sharp, clean, and invigorating compared to the stuffy, humid funk of the hut. You hear the church bell ringing in the distance. Matins is over, prime is beginning. The village is waking up. Chimney smoke, or rather roof smoke, is rising from the other huts in the valley, thin gray ribbons connecting the earth to the sky. Signals of life. Your neighbors made it too. You go back inside. The pottage is already being reheated. The cow is demanding to be milked. The loom is waiting. The threshing floor is waiting. The relentless work of survival begins again. You are tired, you are sore, and you are cold. But as you grab your wooden bowl and stand near the growing fire, feeling the heat seep into your tunic, you feel a surge of something powerful. You are the descendant of people who survived ice ages. You are a master of thermodynamics, a biological fortress, and a guardian of the flame. You faced the long dark, and you won. The sun is up, the night is over, and you are ready to do it all again. Wind down, and so we leave the year 1325 behind. The sun has risen over the snow-covered valley, and the frantic struggle against the freezing dark has given way to the steady, rhythmic labor of the day. We can step back now, away from the smoke of the hearth, away from the scratchy wool and the hard dirt floors. We can let the image of that small, resilient hut fade gently into the mist of history. Take a deep breath now, not a shallow, freezing sip of air, but a full, deep, comforting breath. Feel the warmth of your own room, the softness of your own bed. You are not fighting for survival tonight. You are safe. The walls around you are solid and sealed. The air is still and warm. There are no drafts seeking you out, no frost creeping across the floor. You have the luxury of safety, the gift of comfort that those peasants worked so hard to dream of. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Let the tension of the winter storm melt away, replaced by a heavy, golden sense of relaxation. The wind outside is just wind. It cannot touch you here. The darkness is just a curtain pulled shut to help you rest. You are suspended in a perfect, timeless warmth. Think of the fire we tended together, not as a desperate necessity, but as a gentle, glowing ember in your mind. A soft, orange light that flickers slowly, hypnotically, pulsing with a deep, radiant heat. It is a quiet companion watching over you as you drift. The work is done. The night watch is over. The stars are wheeling slowly overhead, silent and peaceful. You can let go now. You can drift down, deeper and deeper, into the soft, welcoming velvet of sleep.